A rainy night, an unexpected push and a jump no one could have foreseen. When everything seemed lost, a horse's loyalty defied the impossible and forever changed the fate of a farm. The night in Wichita Falls was pouring rain, turning the dirt roads into veritable muddy quagmires. John Baker gripped the steering wheel of his pickup truck tightly, his eyes alert to the puddles forming on the uneven asphalt. The radio crackled, alternating between country music and static, while heavy drops pummeled the windshield. In the truck bed, protected by a tarp, rested his faithful companion Maverick, a majestic quarter horse that accompanied him on all his travels around the Guiding Star Ranch. The property, a legacy of 3 generations, was a source of pride for John. Every inch of that land held stories of his family, from the first coffee plant his grandfather had planted to the soybean fields that now stretched as far as the eye could see. In recent months, however, a shadow had loomed over his legacy. Samuel Roth, an investor who had arrived in the region with promises of progress, had been moving heaven and earth to take possession of strategic properties. His methods were questionable, but his influence grew every day. John had discovered, through meticulous investigation, documents that proved fraud in contracts and embezzlement linked to the businessman's name. The rancher adjusted the diary in the inner pocket of his coat, feeling the weight of the pages that contained all the evidence against Samuel. That notebook was his only guarantee that the truth would come to light. The rain increased, and thunder echoed across the dark sky when John spotted the bridge over the Red River. The anonymous note he had received earlier burned in his memory. "Come to the Red River Bridge at 9 p.m. Crucial information about your ranch." Even suspicious, something in his instinct pushed him towards that meeting. Maverick neighed in the truck bed, restless, as if sensing danger. John parked the pickup near the head of the bridge. The place was deserted. Only the sound of rain and the turbulent river broke the silence. He got out of the vehicle, protecting the documents under his coat. Maverick, agitated, began to stamp his hooves against the floor of the truck bed. "Easy, friend," John murmured, adjusting his soaked hat. "It shouldn't take long." His footsteps echoed on the wet wood of the bridge as he advanced. The weak illumination from the lampposts barely managed to break through the curtain of water falling. It was then that a silhouette emerged from the darkness. It was a woman, walking with hesitant steps towards him. As she approached, John noticed something peculiar. Her eyes had a glassy appearance, and she was groping the air with her hands. She was blind. The woman stopped a few meters from him, rain streaming down her weathered face. "Mrs. Rose?" John recognized the resident of the nearby village. "Did you send me the note?" "John Baker," her voice trembled. "Forgive me." Before he could process those words, John felt a violent push on his back. The world spun, and the biting cold of the water invaded his lungs. The current of the Red River, merciless, began to drag him into the depths. On the shore, Maverick reared up in the truck bed, his desperate neighs echoing through the stormy night. The animal, which had always demonstrated an almost supernatural connection with his owner, sensed the imminent danger. With extraordinary strength, the horse broke the ties that held him, leaping out of the vehicle. The rain continued to fall, relentless, as the drama unfolded over the turbulent waters of the Red River. John fought against the current, his hands desperately seeking something to grab onto. The diary, soaked, still remained secure in his pocket, guarding the secrets that could change the fate of the entire region. Maverick didn't hesitate. With the strength and determination that only the noblest animals possess, the quarter horse advanced onto the bridge, his hooves beating against the soaked wood. The rain battered his coat, but his instincts guided him towards his owner. Without thinking twice, the animal leaped into the turbulent waters. Rose, still standing on the bridge, heard the unfolding scene with horror. The sounds of water, desperate, neighing, and the awareness of what she had helped to do weighed heavily on her heart. Samuel's words echoed in her mind. "John Baker destroyed your family, Rose. He needs to pay for what he did." Now there under the storm, she began to question the veracity of that story. Meanwhile, in the churning waters, John struggled to keep his head above the surface. The current dragged him mercilessly, and his muscles were beginning to give in to fatigue and cold. It was then that he felt something brush against his arm. Maverick had managed to reach him, swimming with surprising strength against the current. "My friend," John murmured, grabbing onto the animal's mane. The horse, demonstrating extraordinary intelligence, began to swim diagonally, seeking a safer shore. Each movement was calculated, each stroke a fight against the force of the river. The rain continued relentlessly, making visibility difficult, but Maverick's instinct was infallible. In town, Samuel Roth awaited news in his luxurious office. The ticking of the clock marked the minutes as he savored a glass of whiskey. His plan seemed perfect. Use Rose, a blind woman who carried a manipulated resentment against John, to execute his revenge. Who would suspect her? The story of the family feud he had invented served only to give credibility to the farce. Back at the river, after what seemed like an eternity, Maverick finally reached a shallower part. John, exhausted and soaked, managed to plant his feet on the muddy bottom. With his last strength, he dragged himself to the shore, falling to his knees in the mud. The horse remained by his side, its body serving as support so the rancher wouldn't collapse. "How you saved me, partner," John whispered, hugging the animal's neck. The rain was beginning to diminish, but the danger was far from over. John knew he needed to act quickly. He checked the diary in his pocket. The pages were soaked, but still legible. Those notes were his only proof against Samuel's schemes. Maverick, still alert, turned his attention back to the bridge. Rose had disappeared into the darkness, probably to report the success of the ambush to Samuel. What she didn't know, however, was that her participation in the plan had made her a disposable piece in the businessman's game. John mounted Maverick, his muscles protesting with every movement. The horse, even after the Herculean effort of the rescue, remained steady, ready to carry his owner to safety. They needed to reach the ranch before Samuel put the next phase of his plan into action. The night was still long, and the shadows hid secrets that would soon come to light. In town, Samuel was already preparing the false documents he would use to take possession of the Guiding Star Ranch. What he didn't count on was that his plan had a flaw. He had underestimated the loyalty of a horse and the willpower of a man determined to protect his legacy. Dawn arrived lazily at the Guiding Star Ranch, painting the sky with orange hues that barely managed to break through the remaining clouds from the storm. The workers were already moving about the yard when Maverick appeared, carrying John on his back. The boss's condition caused immediate commotion. Soaked, covered in mud, and with his face marked by exhaustion. Sarah Thompson, the housekeeper who had been working at the ranch for 2 decades, was the first to run to his aid. "Good Lord, Mr. John, what happened?" Her wrinkled hands trembled as she helped the boss dismount. Maverick, exhausted but vigilant, stayed close, his eyes attentive to every movement around him. "I need a hot bath and dry clothes, Sarah," John murmured, feeling every muscle in his body protest. "And nobody can know I'm here. Nobody." While John recovered inside the house, Samuel Roth began his plan in town. With a calculated smile, he entered the county clerk's office as soon as the doors opened. He carried a folder full of meticulously forged documents, a will that supposedly transferred the Guiding Star Ranch to his name, along with promissory notes that proved John's astronomical debts. "Mrs. Carmen," he greeted the clerk with false cordiality, "I have a delicate situation to resolve. John Baker disappeared last night, leaving several financial commitments pending." The news of John's disappearance began to spread through the town like wildfire. Samuel had planted strategic people to spread rumors. John had fled because of debts, abandoned everything. Maybe he was even out of the country. The web of lies grew, fueled by fear and gossip. At the ranch, John watched everything from the bedroom window, his hands clutching the soaked diary. The pages, still damp, contained all the truth about Samuel's schemes, fraudulent contracts, threats to small property owners, misappropriation of public resources. It was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. "Sarah," he called the housekeeper, "I need you to do something for me. Go into town and look for Sheriff Anthony Norris, only him, understood? Tell him I need to speak with him urgently, but be discreet." Meanwhile, Rose walked the streets of Wichita Falls, her white cane guiding her hesitant steps. Her conscience weighed like lead in her chest. Samuel's words about John having harmed her family began to sound false in her memory. Why were there never any concrete proofs? Why did the stories always change in details? At the sheriff's office, Anthony Norris was already on his third cup of morning coffee when Sarah Thompson entered, breathless and agitated. His experienced eyes immediately noticed that something was wrong. "Sheriff," she whispered, approaching his desk, "Mr. John needs you. It's urgent." Norris had known John since childhood. They were long-time friends, and his police instinct told him that the rumors about fleeing due to debts didn't make sense. John was an honorable man who carried the weight of the family name with pride. Something much bigger was happening. In Samuel's office, Rose waited to be received. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her cane. Through the door, she could hear the businessman's voice on the phone. "The will is already being registered. In a few days, those lands will be ours. As for the blind woman, don't worry. She's not a problem, and if she becomes one, we know how to deal with that." Rose's blood ran cold. Samuel's cold and calculating voice revealed his true nature. There was no concern for justice or family reparation, just pure greed. She had been used as a disposable tool in a larger plan. At the ranch, Maverick remained restless, refusing to enter the stable. The animal seemed to sense that his mission wasn't complete. From time to time, he turned his gaze to the road that led to the bridge, as if he knew that place still held important secrets to be revealed. Sheriff Anthony Norris drove his old patrol car down the dirt road that led to the Guiding Star Ranch, the red dust rising behind the car like a curtain. His mind worked quickly, connecting the dots of the puzzle that was beginning to form. In recent months, several small property owners had come to the sheriff's office with complaints against Samuel Roth, but the evidence always mysteriously disappeared. Upon arriving at the ranch, he was discreetly received by Sarah Thompson, who led him through the back of the house. John was waiting for him in the office, still looking haggard, but with a determined gleam in his eye. On the solid wood desk, the soaked diary was open, its pages being carefully dried one by one. "You won't believe what I discovered, Anthony," John began, his voice still hoarse. "Samuel isn't just an ambitious investor. He's built a complex scheme of fraud and document manipulation. Every property he's acquired in recent years has a story of coercion behind it." As the two men talked, Rose walked nervously in her small room in the center of town. The words she had heard in Samuel's office wouldn't leave her head. The story about John having harmed her family was beginning to crumble. She remembered how Samuel had appeared in her life, bringing documents that proved John was responsible for the financial difficulties her family had faced in the past. "But why was I never allowed to touch these documents?" she murmured to herself, now realizing the inconsistencies. Why were they always just words? At the ranch, Maverick continued his unusual behavior. The horse refused to move away from the main house, neighing restlessly whenever a stranger approached. The workers, accustomed to the animal's extraordinary intelligence, knew he was acting as a voluntary guardian. Samuel, in his luxurious office, received the latest updates on the registration of the false will. His plan seemed perfect. With John supposedly missing and the forged documents in the process of being registered, the Guiding Star Ranch would soon be his. Those lands were too strategic for his future plans, a fundamental piece in the puzzle of his empire under construction. Sheriff Norris was seen driving to the ranch, one of his henchmen informed him over the phone. Samuel's smile disappeared. Norris was known for his integrity and shrewdness. His presence at the ranch could complicate plans. "Keep me informed of his every move," he ordered, hanging up the phone forcefully. In the ranch office, John and Norris examined the evidence contained in the diary. Each page revealed a new layer of Samuel's scheme: manipulated contracts, veiled threats, forged documents. The sheriff made detailed notes, his face becoming more serious with each revelation. "This is bigger than we imagined, John," Norris commented, running his hand through his graying hair. "Samuel has built a network of influence that extends throughout the region, but he made a mistake. He underestimated the loyalty of the people around you." Sarah Thompson entered the office. bringing fresh coffee and news from town. The rumors about John's disappearance were growing, fueled by people clearly instructed by Samuel. Some were already talking about officially declaring his absence, which would facilitate the transfer of the lands. "We need to act fast," John stated, standing up with determination. "But we also need to be smart. Samuel has people everywhere, and one false move can put everything at risk." On the horizon, dark clouds were forming again, promising more rain. Maverick, outside, maintained his tireless vigil. The animal seemed to understand that a storm greater than the one from the previous night was about to break over the Guiding Star Ranch, a storm that wasn't made of water and wind, but of greed and power. Rose walked the streets of Wichita Falls, her white cane marking the rhythm of her hesitant steps. The weight of guilt and fear consumed her from within. After overhearing Samuel's conversation in his office, she had begun to piece together a dark puzzle. Each memory, each conversation with the businessman gained new meanings. Her steps led her to the small-town church, where Father Michael, a gentleman with white hair and a gentle smile, found her sitting on the first pew. The priest had known Rose since she was a little girl and immediately perceived that something was troubling her. "What afflicts your heart, my child?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Father," her voice trembled, "what if I've done something terrible? Believing I was doing justice. What if I've been used to harm an innocent person?" Meanwhile, at the Guiding Star Ranch, Sheriff Norris and John worked tirelessly, organizing the evidence contained in the diary. Sarah Thompson came in and out of the office, bringing coffee and updates on the movements in town. Maverick maintained his constant guard, his keen instincts capturing every suspicious movement in the surroundings. "Look at this," Norris pointed to one of the diary pages, where John had recorded a series of numbers and dates. "These values correspond exactly to the complaints we've received in recent months." Samuel was using straw men to buy the properties, but the money was coming from a single source. John nodded, connecting more dots of the scheme. "And here," he pointed to another note, "is the proof that all the documents he uses are forged. I managed to track down the clandestine printing shop he uses in Fort Worth." In town, Samuel received another important visit in his office. The substitute notary, a man of servile appearance, brought news about the registration of the false will. "Mr. Roth, we have a problem," the man stuttered nervously. "Mrs. Carmen is asking questions about the authenticity of the documents. She's known Mr. Baker's signature for years, and your job is to ensure these documents are registered," Samuel cut in, his voice cold as ice. "Or do I need to remind you of the favors you owe me?" The notary swallowed hard, nodding quickly before leaving. Samuel remained in his chair, his fingers drumming on the mahogany desk. His plans were beginning to encounter small obstacles, and this irritated him deeply. Back at the church, Rose was making a decision that would change the course of events. After a long conversation with Father Michael, she understood that the real sin would be to remain silent. "I need to tell the truth," she declared, standing up with determination. "But I need your help, Father. Samuel has eyes and ears all over town." The priest smiled, taking his keys. "I know someone who can help. Sheriff Norris is a trustworthy man." At the ranch, the afternoon was falling when Sarah Thompson spotted a car approaching. It was Father Michael, and in the passenger seat was Rose. Maverick, recognizing the woman from the bridge, began to neigh and stamp his hooves on the ground, alerting everyone. John and Norris quickly came out of the house, meeting the unlikely duo in the yard. Rose, trembling but determined, stepped forward. "Mr. Baker," her voice was firm despite the fear, "I've come to confess the whole truth. Samuel used me, made me believe lies about you. Now I know I was just a piece in his dirty game." Sheriff Norris immediately began taking notes, while John observed the woman with a mixture of compassion and caution. Maverick, surprisingly, began to calm down, as if sensing the sincerity in Rose's words. "He has a plan," Rose continued. "The false will is just the beginning. Samuel wants to use your lands for something bigger, something that involves powerful people from Fort Worth." Rose's revelations were the missing piece of the puzzle. Now, with a witness willing to speak and the evidence from the diary, they had enough to start dismantling Samuel Roth's empire of lies. The news that Rose had disappeared reached Samuel's ears like an alarm bell. His informant at the church reported that she had been seen getting into Father Michael's car, but no one knew their destination. The businessman felt control of the situation, slipping through his fingers like water. "Find her," he ordered his henchmen, "and find out where that meddling priest took her." At the Guiding Star Ranch, the group gathered in the office worked against time. Rose revealed every detail of Samuel's manipulations, how he had convinced her that John was responsible for her family's ruin, how he had meticulously planned each step of the scheme. "He has an entire network of bought people," Rose explained, her hands nervously gripping her cane. "Employees at the clerk's office, some police officers, even a judge in Fort Worth. They all receive money to turn a blind eye to the false documents." Sheriff Norris listened attentively, recording every word. His experience told him they needed to act quickly, before Samuel realized they were putting the pieces together. "We need more concrete evidence." The sheriff pondered, something that directly links Samuel to the frauds. It was then that Sarah Thompson rushed into the office. "Mr. John, there's something you need to see. Maverick is acting very strangely near the creek." The group followed. The housekeeper to the back of the property, where Maverick was insistently digging near an old tree. The animal, which had already demonstrated extraordinary intuition, seemed to want to show something. "This place," John murmured, an old memory coming back to his mind. "My father used to say he had buried important ranch documents here to protect them." With the help of the workers, they began to dig in the spot indicated by Maverick. It didn't take long to find an old metal box, preserved from time and moisture. Inside, they discovered the original documents of the Guiding Star Ranch, including detailed maps that revealed something surprising. "This explains Samuel's interest," John exclaimed, studying the papers. "There's a spring here that feeds the entire water system of the region. Whoever controls these lands controls the water for dozens of properties." Sheriff Norris immediately began making calls. With the evidence from the diary, Rose's testimony, and now the original documents, they had a solid case against Samuel. In town, the businessman was beginning to feel the noose tightening. His contacts at the clerk's office informed him that Mrs. Carman refused to register the will without a more detailed verification. The judge, who was in his pocket, began to avoid his calls. "Things are getting out of control," he muttered to himself as he observed the movement on the street through his office window. Back at the ranch, Rose shared more revelations. "Samuel has a safe in his office," she explained. "He keeps all the original documents he stole from other properties there. He made me clean that room several times, thinking that because I was blind, I didn't pose a danger." John and Norris exchanged significant looks. That information could be the key to unmasking Samuel once and for all. "We need a search warrant," the sheriff concluded. "With all this evidence, I can get one from the chief judge of the county. He's returning from a trip tomorrow." Night was falling over the Guiding Star Ranch, bringing with it a sense of renewed hope. Maverick, after his crucial discovery, finally accepted entering the stable to rest. The animal seemed satisfied, as if knowing that his participation had once again been fundamental. Sarah Thompson prepared a hearty dinner for everyone, while Father Michael offered words of comfort to Rose, who was still struggling with guilt over her participation in Samuel's plans. "Sincere repentance is the first step towards redemption," the priest assured her gently. "You're doing the right thing now." The sun had barely risen when Sheriff Norris arrived at the Wichita Falls courthouse. Chief Judge Franklin Matthews, who had just returned from his trip, was already waiting for him in his chambers. On the dark wooden desk, the evidence against Samuel Roth formed a considerable pile. John's diary, Rose's testimonies, the original documents found at the ranch. "This is very serious, Norris," the judge commented, adjusting his glasses as he examined the papers. "Samuel has built a sophisticated fraud scheme, and from what I see here, there are some big players involved." "That's why we need to act quickly, Your Honor," the sheriff responded, his face showing concern. "Samuel must already be suspicious. If we delay, the evidence might disappear." At the Guiding Star Ranch, John was coordinating a peculiar operation. With the help of Sarah Thompson and some trusted employees, he was organizing a false routine of abandoning the property. Samuel needed to believe his plan was working. "Spread the news in town," John instructed. "Say we're preparing to sell the cattle, that the employees are looking for other jobs. Samuel needs to think he's won." Maverick, as if understanding the plan, remained strategically quiet in the stable, something unusual for the always alert animal. Rose, who was now under protection at the ranch, was helping Sarah Thompson map out all of Samuel's contacts in the region. "He has a special file in the safe," Rose explained, her hands moving in the air as she described the office she knew so well. "Every Friday I would hear the sound of the safe door opening. He kept important documents there, always very careful not to mention anything near me." In the center of town, Samuel received news that pleased him. His informants reported that the Guiding Star Ranch seemed to be preparing for a major dismantling. Satisfied, he called a meeting with his main allies. "The plan is working," he announced, pouring himself some imported whiskey. "Soon, those lands will be ours, and with control of the spring, we'll have the entire region in our hands." What Samuel didn't know was that among his guests was an informant for Sheriff Norris. Every word of his would be carefully recorded and reported later. In the judge's chambers, Judge Matthews finished analyzing the documents. His face showed even greater seriousness. "I'll issue the search and seizure warrant right now," he declared, picking up his pen, "and also a preventive arrest order. The evidence is damning and the risk of Samuel fleeing is high." Norris nodded, already mentally planning the operation. It needed to be quick and precise. Samuel had eyes all over town, and an information leak could jeopardize everything. Back at the ranch, John received an unexpected visit. Mrs. Carman, the clerk who had refused to register the false will, had arrived discreetly through the back of the property. "I have something you gentlemen need to see," she announced, taking a folder from her bag. Samuel tried to register similar documents in other towns. "I managed to contact some clerks' offices and gathered everything." John and Rose listened attentively as the clerk exposed more details of the scheme. Maverick, who had initially become agitated at the visitor's arrival, now remained calm, as if recognizing another ally in the fight against Samuel. Sarah Thompson rushed into the office. "Mr. John, Sheriff Norris is on the phone. He says it's urgent." The call was brief but enough to quicken everyone's hearts. The net was about to close in. The warrant had been issued, and the operation would begin at dawn the next day. "We need to keep everything in absolute secrecy," John instructed the small group gathered. "Samuel can't suspect anything until the last moment." On the horizon, dark clouds were forming again over Wichita Falls. Nature seemed to be conspiring to create the perfect scenario for the approaching confrontation. A storm was about to break over the town, but this time it wouldn't just be water washing the streets of the place. Night fell over Wichita Falls, bringing with it a palpable tension. In Samuel's office, the meeting with his allies extended beyond normal hours. The businessman, intoxicated by the apparent success of his plans, didn't notice the apprehensive look of some present. "Tomorrow will be a great day," he declared, raising his glass. "With the Guiding Star Ranch in our hands, we'll begin the largest operation this region has ever seen. Control of the water will give us power over everything and everyone." Among those present was Charles Mendoza, a lawyer who had been working behind the scenes of Samuel's business for years. Something about the meeting deeply troubled him. His client's words sounded increasingly like explicit confessions of crimes. At the Guiding Star Ranch, preparations for the next day were happening discreetly. John, Sheriff Norris, and a small team of trusted officers reviewed every detail of the operation. Rose, with her memory sharpened by the absence of sight, described Samuel's routine meticulously. "He always arrives at the office at 8 o'clock sharp," she explained. "The first thing he does is open the safe to store his personal briefcase. That's when he's most vulnerable, as he dismisses the security guards for privacy." Sarah Thompson served coffee to everyone, her face translating the concern for the next day's events. Maverick in the stable maintained an unusual silence, as if he also understood the gravity of the moment. "The operation needs to be synchronized," Norris explained, pointing to a map of the town. While the main team enters the office with the warrant, other patrol cars will circulate strategically around town to prevent any escape attempt. John listened to everything attentively. His thoughts turned to the generations of his family who had built the Guiding Star Ranch. It's not just for me, he reflected aloud. It's for everyone who depends on this land, for the entire region that Samuel wants to control. In town, Samuel's office was finally emptying. The businessman, satisfied with the meeting, didn't notice when Charles Mendoza discreetly copied some documents from the folder on his desk. The lawyer had made his decision. He would not be complicit in the crimes that were about to come to light. Mrs. Carmen, at her home, organized more documents that would prove Samuel's frauds. Years of experience as a clerk had taught her to recognize forgeries, and she had kept detailed records of all of Samuel's suspicious attempts. "May God help us tomorrow," she murmured, putting the papers in her briefcase. Back at the ranch, Rose couldn't sleep. Sitting on the porch, she listened to the night sounds of the property, while her conscience took her back to that night on the bridge. How could I have been so blind, she thought, the irony of her own words not escaping her. John approached, silently offering her a cup of coffee. "Don't blame yourself anymore, Rose," he said softly. "You're helping to make things right now." In the stable, Maverick began to neigh softly, an almost melodic sound that echoed through the night. The animal, which had already demonstrated an extraordinary sensitivity to events, seemed to be singing a prelude to the battle that was approaching. Sarah Thompson, in her room, lit a candle and said her prayers. Her lips murmured requests for protection for all who would be involved in the next day's events. Sheriff Norris, before leaving, gave one last warning. "Tomorrow, when the sun rises, there's no turning back. We need to be prepared for any reaction." From Samuel. The hours of the early morning dragged on slowly. In town, the empty streets seemed to hold their breath, waiting for dawn. The wind whispered through the trees of the Guiding Star Ranch, as if nature itself was conspiring for the approaching outcome. The moon, almost full, illuminated the sky of Wichita Falls, casting mysterious shadows over the sleeping town. In his office, Samuel slept in his armchair, dreaming of the empire he believed he was about to build. Little did he know that dawn would bring not the realization of his plans, but the beginning of his downfall. The first ray of sun had barely touched the rooftops of Wichita Falls when the operation began. Police vehicles positioned themselves discreetly at strategic points around town, while Sheriff Norris personally led the main team. Outside Samuel's office, everything seemed normal, except for the unusual number of passers-by, plainclothes officers strategically positioned. John observed everything from afar, inside a pickup truck parked 2 blocks from the location. Beside him, Rose anxiously waited, her hands gripping her white cane tightly. Her presence there was crucial. She knew every detail of Samuel's office, every sound, every routine. "He's coming," Rose whispered, recognizing the characteristic sound of Samuel's car. As always, punctually at 8. The businessman parked his imported car, adjusted his silk tie, and walked with his usual arrogance to the building entrance. His security guards accompanied him to the office door, where, as usual, they were dismissed so he could have his moments of morning privacy. Inside the office, Samuel followed his routine. He walked to the safe camouflaged behind a painting, turned the combination and opened the metal door. It was at that moment that Sheriff Norris's voice cut through the silence. "Samuel Roth, we have a search and seizure warrant." The businessman froze, the folder he was holding slipping from his hands. He turned slowly to find Norris and 2 officers, all with badges on display. His mind worked quickly, calculating his options. "This is absurd," he shouted, trying to maintain his composure. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds of all your frauds," Norris interrupted, approaching the still open safe. "And it seems we chose the perfect moment to find the evidence." On the street, John and Rose listened to everything through the police radio. The tension was palpable. Suddenly, Rose straightened in her seat. "Something's wrong," she alerted. "The sound. Samuel always closes the safe when he's interrupted. He's going to try something." No sooner had she finished speaking Then a noise of papers being torn echoed through the radio. Samuel, in a desperate move, was trying to destroy crucial documents, but he didn't count on the agility of the officers, who quickly restrained him. At the Guiding Star Ranch, Sarah Thompson and the employees awaited news. Maverick, inexplicably, began to neigh and stamp his hooves on the stable floor, as if sensing the tension of the moment even from a distance. Samuel's office transformed into an investigation scene. Each document from the safe was carefully catalogued and photographed. The evidence was even more devastating than they had imagined. Beyond the real estate frauds, there were records of bribes, threats, and an elaborate scheme to control the region's water resources. "You don't understand," Samuel tried to argue, his arrogance transforming into despair. "I was going to bring progress to Wichita Falls. That backward rancher is just delaying development." Norris just shook his head, continuing his methodical work. Samuel's words only served to confirm his guilt. On the street, a small crowd began to form. Years of fear and submission to Samuel's misdeeds transformed that moment into a spectacle of justice. Among the curious onlookers, Charles Mendoza, the repentant lawyer, observed everything with a mixture of relief and apprehension. John decided to approach the building. Upon seeing him, Samuel completely lost his composure. "How? You should be." His voice failed, realizing he was incriminating himself even more. "At the bottom of the river?" John completed, his voice calm but firm. "Sorry to disappoint you, but I have good friends, including a very special horse." Rose, who accompanied John, stepped forward. "And there are people who no longer let themselves be manipulated by your lies." "Samuel!" The businessman paled upon recognizing Rose's voice. His perfect plan was crumbling like a house of cards. Each person he had manipulated, each document he had forged, each threat he had made, everything now came to light, exposing the true nature of his empire. As Samuel was being led out of the building, the town of Wichita Falls seemed to be awakening from a long nightmare. People gathered on the sidewalks, some applauding discreetly, others just silently observing the end of an era of fear and manipulation. It's you. The office, the investigation work continued intensely. Mrs. Carmen arrived bringing more documents that proved the forgeries. Her experience as a clerk would be fundamental in unraveling each layer of the criminal scheme. "Look at this," she pointed to a pile of newly discovered papers. He wasn't planning to stop at the Guiding Star Ranch. There are studies and maps of all the properties that control water sources in the region. John examined the documents carefully. Samuel's plan was even more ambitious than they had imagined. He intended to create a monopoly on water access, turning ranchers into hostages to his interests. He didn't just want the land, John concluded. He wanted absolute control over everyone's lives. Rose, using her privileged memory, helped locate more evidence. "In the third drawer of the desk," she indicated, "he always kept a green folder with important documents. The sound of the paper was different, thicker. The folder contained contracts not yet executed, revealing that Samuel was planning to expand his scheme to other states. The businessman's ambition knew no bounds. At the police station, Samuel faced his first interrogation. His initial arrogance gave way to growing nervousness as he realized the amount of evidence against him. His empire built on lies and manipulations was rapidly crumbling. "Your accomplices are already cooperating," Norris informed, placing employee and ally testimonies on the table. "We even have attorney Charles Mendoza's confession about all the document frauds." At the Guiding Star Ranch, the news of Samuel's arrest was received with a mixture of relief and contained celebration. Sarah Thompson organized a special breakfast for the employees, who could finally work without the weight of constant threat. Maverick, as if understanding the importance of the moment, grazed peacefully in the field, his behavior returning to normal for the first time since the night of the attempted murder. The animal, which had played a crucial role in the entire story, seemed satisfied with the outcome. As evening fell, John gathered everyone on the ranch's porch. Rose, Sheriff Norris, Mrs. Carmen, Father Michael, and Sarah Thompson each had contributed in a unique way to unmasking Samuel. This wasn't just a personal victory, John declared, emotional. It was a victory of truth over lies, of justice over greed. Father Michael, with his characteristic wisdom, added, "And proof that there is no chain of lies that time and truth cannot break." Rose, who had carried the weight of guilt for so long, finally felt at peace. "I learned that true blindness is not of the eyes," she reflected, "but of the soul when we let ourselves be deceived by false promises." In town, Samuel's office was being sealed by the police. Employees were leaving carrying boxes of documents that would serve as evidence. The empire he had built, based on false documents and veiled threats, was transforming into evidence of his crimes. Judge Matthews was already preparing the necessary legal procedures. "The case is solid," he assured Norris. "The evidence is irrefutable." Night fell over Wichita Falls, bringing a sense of renewal. At the Guiding Star Ranch, the lights of the main house were a beacon of hope for the entire region. The nightmare was over, and with it the shadow that had loomed over John Baker's lands. A week after Samuel's arrest, Wichita Falls began to breathe new air. The office that once housed his empire of lies was now being transformed into a community center, an idea suggested by Father Michael and promptly supported by the residents. At the Guiding Star Ranch, John organized an important meeting with landowners from the region. The main hall of the house was full, with ranchers who, little by little, began to reveal how they too had been pressured and threatened by Samuel over the years. "We need to unite," John proposed, unrolling a large map on the mahogany table. "The springs that Samuel coveted so much can be managed cooperatively, benefiting everyone." Rose, who had decided to remain at the ranch after the events, surprised everyone with her organizational ability. Her other senses, sharpened by the lack of sight, made her especially adept at perceiving people's true intentions. "Mr. Anderson from Bella Vista Ranch is especially worried," she whispered to John during a break. "From his voice, it seems Samuel still has something on him." Sarah Thompson circulated among the guests, serving coffee and cornbread, her specialties that always helped make the environment more welcoming. The housekeeper, who had long been part of the family, smiled to see the house once again full of life and purpose. In the stable, Maverick received special attention. John had decided to transform part of the property into a horse training center, inspired by the incredible demonstration of loyalty and intelligence from his companion. "This animal is not just a horse," he explained to interested visitors. "He's living proof that there are bonds that go beyond our understanding." In town, Sheriff Norris coordinated the organization of documents seized from Samuel's office. Each paper revealed a new facet of the scheme, and several other properties in the region began to recover their legitimate rights. Mrs. Carmen worked tirelessly to reverse the fraudulent records. Her knowledge and experience were fundamental in restoring the documentary truth of dozens of properties. "It's like rebuilding a puzzle," she explained, adjusting her glasses while examining another document. "Each legitimate deed we find is a family regaining their dignity." Father Michael, always sensitive to the needs of the community, organized a support group for people who had been manipulated by Samuel. Rose became an active participant, sharing her experience and helping others overcome feelings of guilt. "Our healing begins when we realize we were victims of a skilled deceiver," she said during the meetings. "But our strength is revealed when we decide to be part of the solution." John, observing the positive changes spreading throughout the region, decided to implement a project that had long inhabited his dreams. The Guiding Star Ranch would begin to develop a sustainable agriculture program, teaching techniques for preserving springs and conscientious water use. Samuel wanted to use water as an instrument of power, he explained during a meeting with employees. "We're going to transform it into a source of union and prosperity for all." Sarah Thompson, always attentive to details, noticed a significant change in the ranch's atmosphere. People smiled more, conversed more freely, made plans for the future without fear. "It's as if a dark cloud had been blown away," she commented to Rose as they tidied up the kitchen together after another busy day. At the end of that afternoon, John walked around the property with Maverick by his side. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the Wichita Falls sky with shades of orange and pink. The horse, calm and majestic, seemed to share the sense of peace that now hovered over those lands. "You know, friend," John spoke, stroking the animal's mane. "Sometimes you need to face a storm to appreciate even more the calm that comes after." Maverick's gentle neigh sounded like an agreement, echoing across the fields of the Guiding Star Ranch, which now more than ever lived up to its name, shining like a beacon of hope for the entire region. The passing days brought a new routine to the Guiding Star Ranch. Mornings started early, with the sound of birds mixing with the movement of employees arriving for another day of work. The horse training center, still in its initial phase, was already attracting interested parties from all over the region. Rose discovered a new vocation. Her heightened sensitivity made her extraordinarily capable of perceiving animal behavior. She began to help at the training center, developing special techniques to calm more agitated horses. "It's amazing how they respond to touch and voice," she explained to a group of visitors. "When we lose one sense, the others improve in surprising ways." John observed with satisfaction the transformations happening on his property. The sustainable agriculture project was beginning to take shape, with the implementation of efficient irrigation systems and the planting of species adapted to the local climate. "Every drop of water is precious," he taught the young farmers who came to learn the new techniques. "What Samuel saw as an instrument of power, we transform into a source of life." Sarah Thompson expanded her influence beyond the kitchen. Her experience and wisdom made her a kind of informal counselor for the younger employees. Her homemade recipes and stories of the ranch were now part of a book she had begun to write, preserving the memory and traditions of the place. "Each recipe tells a story," she would say, while teaching one of the town girls the right consistency for cornbread. "And each story helps us remember who we are." Sheriff Norris continued his meticulous work in town. The investigation of the seized documents revealed that Samuel's influence extended far beyond Wichita Falls. His discoveries helped other communities recover lands unjustly taken. "It's like untangling a very tangled skein," he explained during a visit to the ranch. "Each thread we pull reveals a new connection." Mrs. Carmen at the clerk's office transformed her experience into a legal education project for small property owners. With support from John and other ranchers, she organized workshops on rural documentation and basic rights. "Knowledge is the best defense against swindlers," she stated, with the authority of someone who had seen up close the damage caused by ignorance. Father Michael expanded the support group meetings, which now happened twice a week. The meetings became a space for healing and renewal, where people shared not only their pains, but also their hopes and plans for the future. Maverick, the silent hero of the entire story, became a kind of mascot for the region. His story of loyalty and bravery even inspired an educational project in local schools, teaching children about the importance of values and true friendship. "Look at that," John commented to Rose during a walk through the orchard. "How things find their natural place when truth prevails." The Guiding Star Ranch transformed into a hub of sustainable and conscious development. The springs, once objects of greed, were now studied and preserved, ensuring clean water not just for the property, but for the entire region. At the end of another productive day, John gathered all the employees for a moment of celebration. The ranch yard was lit by lanterns, and the aroma of Sarah Thompson's fresh coffee mixed with the stories and laughter that echoed through the night. "We are more than a ranch," John declared, his voice laden with emotion. "We are a family that grew through adversity, that learned that true wealth lies in unity and mutual respect." Rose, seated near the group, smiled as she listened to the animated voices around her. Her sensitive fingers traced patterns on the rough surface of her cane, now more a symbol of her journey than a necessity. Sometimes, she reflected aloud, we need to get lost to find our true path. In the stable, Maverick rested peacefully, his shiny coat reflecting the moonlight that began to appear in the sky. The horse that had once faced the furious waters of the Red River was now the guardian of a new era of peace and prosperity at the Guiding Star Ranch. 6 months had passed since Samuel's downfall. Spring arrived in Wichita Falls, bringing not just flowers, but the first concrete results of the changes implemented in the region. The Guiding Star Ranch, now a reference center for sustainable agriculture, received visitors from various states, interested in learning about conscientious water and land management. On a particularly pleasant morning, John was conducting a meeting with representatives from a state university. The pioneering project of spring preservation had caught the attention of the academic community, and a partnership was about to be established. "What you've accomplished here is extraordinary," commented Professor Helen Santos, coordinator of the Environmental Engineering course. "The recovery of degraded areas and the intelligent irrigation system are examples that need to be studied and replicated." Rose, who had developed a special talent for explaining complex processes simply, conducted part of the technical visits. Her heightened sensitivity allowed her to notice details that many overlooked. "Do you notice how the sound of water changes depending on the soil's health?" she explained to visitors. "It's a song that nature teaches us to hear if we pay attention." Sarah Thompson had transformed the ranch's old kitchen into a space for preserving local culture. Her book of recipes and stories was almost ready for publication, with a foreword by Father Michael and illustrations by local artists. "Each dish has a story," she would say, while teaching young cooks. "And each story carries a bit of this land soul." The horse training center, inspired by Maverick's story, had become an even larger project than planned. Besides working with animals, it developed a therapeutic program for children with special needs. "Horses have a special gift for healing," Rose observed, who coordinated part of the program. "They see beyond our limitations." In town, the changes were also visible. Samuel's former office transformed into a community center, buzzed with activities. Mrs. Carmen coordinated a legal education project that had already helped dozens of families regularize their properties. "Knowledge is power," she always said. But power used to build, not to destroy. Sheriff Norris, who continued his meticulous work, frequently received visits from other sheriff's offices. Samuel's case had become a model study of how to dismantle land fraud schemes. "The key was community unity," he explained. "When people lose fear and unite for truth, no corrupt individual can resist." Maverick, now a true local celebrity, maintained his calm routine at the ranch. The horse that had once saved his owner from the waters of the Red River now helped save other lives, participating in equine therapy sessions with surprising gentleness. One afternoon, while observing a group of children interacting with the horses, John was surprised by an unexpected visit. Charles Mendoza, Samuel's former lawyer who had helped dismantle the scheme, had come to see the ranch's projects. "You know, John," he said, observing the property, "when I decided to switch sides, I never imagined I'd be contributing to something so grand. This here is more than a ranch. It's an example that it's possible to do things the right way." The sun was beginning to set when Rose gathered everyone in the yard for a surprise. With Sarah Thompson's help, she had organized a special celebration, the official launch of the Spring Preservation Program. "Each drop of water we save," she spoke, her voice choked with emotion, "is a promise of future we fulfill. Each seed we plant is a dream coming true." Rose's words echoed across the property, carried by the gentle evening breeze. In the stable, Maverick softly neighed, as if in agreement. The Guiding Star Ranch, which had once almost succumbed to greed, now shone brighter than ever, illuminating the path to a more just and sustainable future. The first anniversary of the horse training center was approaching, and with it, a series of special events was being prepared at the Guiding Star Ranch. The chosen date couldn't be more significant. It coincided with the night Maverick had saved John from the waters of the Red River. Preparations were bustling throughout the property. Sarah Thompson coordinated a team of cooks, preparing traditional treats for the expected visitors. The aroma of cornbread and fresh coffee filled the morning air, mixing with the dew that still covered the fields. "Food also tells our story," she explained to her helpers while kneading bread dough. "Each flavor carries a piece of our memories." Rose, who in recent months had developed a unique training method based on sounds and touches, was preparing a special presentation with the horses from the center. Her extraordinary sensitivity allowed her to communicate with the animals in a way that impressed even the most experienced specialists. "Horses teach us that trust doesn't depend on what we see," she explained during rehearsals. "It depends on what we feel." John observed the preparations with a heart full of gratitude. The Guiding Star Ranch was no longer just a rural property. It had transformed into a symbol of resistance and renewal. The Spring Preservation Project already benefited the entire region, and the sustainable agriculture techniques developed there were being studied in universities. "Who would have thought," he commented to Sheriff Norris, who had come to help with the preparations, "that so much good would be born from that stormy night?" The sheriff, who continued his tireless work in town, smiled. The investigations that began with Samuel had triggered a series of operations throughout the state, dismantling other land fraud schemes. "Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air," he replied philosophically. On the day of the celebration, the ranch awoke in festive spirits. Colorful banners decorated the path from the main gate to the training center. Maverick, as if understanding the importance of the date, displayed an even more majestic bearing, his coat shining under the morning sun. Visitors began to arrive early. Among them were families benefited by the equine therapy program, farmers who had learned sustainable management techniques, and even journalists interested in documenting the region's transformation. Father Michael conducted a special blessing at the beginning of the celebrations. His words echoed across the ranch yard. "Here, we've learned that good always triumphs, not by force but through the persistence of love and truth." Rose had prepared a special surprise. With the help of children from the therapeutic program, she presented a performance where horses responded to different sounds and vocal commands, demonstrating how true communication transcends physical barriers. "Each of us has a special gift," she told the moved audience. "True wisdom lies in using that gift for the good of others." Mrs. Carmen, who now led a legal education project for small property owners, took the opportunity to announce a new initiative, a scholarship program in agrarian law for young people in the region. "Knowledge," she declared, "is the best defense against injustice." As evening fell, when the first stars began to dot the Wichita Falls sky, John gathered everyone for a special moment. Standing beside Maverick, he shared memories of that fateful night and the transformations that followed. "This horse," he said, stroking the animal's mane, "didn't just save my life. He taught us that loyalty, courage, and love are the true forces that move the world." Sarah Thompson served a special dinner with all the traditional dishes of the region. Stories multiplied around the tables, stories of overcoming, of new beginnings, of dreams realized. Rose, seated near Maverick, smiled as she listened to the happy voices that filled the night. Her own journey, from guilt to redemption, was a testimony to how sincere repentance can open doors to a new dawn. The full moon illuminated the Guiding Star Ranch, its glow reflecting on the now preserved waters of the Red River. The same river that had once almost taken a life was now a source of life for the entire region, its waters running free and clean, carrying with them the promise of a better future. 2 years had passed since that stormy night that forever changed the destiny of Wichita Falls. The Guiding Star Ranch, now nationally recognized as a model of sustainable development, was preparing for a historic moment: the inauguration of the Panhandle Waters Institute, a center for environmental research and education that had been born from the shared dreams of all who had lived through that extraordinary story. The day dawned with a special beauty. The sun rose lazily over the Red River, its waters now cleaner than ever, reflecting the sky like a mirror. John, standing on the porch of the main house, observed the final preparations for the inauguration ceremony. "Seems like a dream, doesn't it?" asked Rose, who approached silently. Her cane now almost an unnecessary accessory, such was her familiarity with every inch of the ranch. Who would have thought that so much good would come from that night of despair? Sarah Thompson, who had spent the week preparing special treats for the celebration, joined them on the porch. Her book of ranch recipes and stories had become a regional bestseller, preserving the memory and flavors of that land. "Coffee's ready," she announced, bringing a tray, made especially to start this important day. In the stable, Maverick, now a respectable but still majestic senior, was receiving special care. The horse, which had become a living symbol of loyalty and courage, had a special role in the ceremony. His example had inspired the creation of one of the Institute's main programs, the Equine Therapy Project, that already served hundreds of children. Guests began to arrive early. Sheriff Norris, now the regional police superintendent, came accompanied by state authorities. Mrs. Carman, who had transformed her work at the clerk's office into a citizenship project, brought a group of law students, the first beneficiaries of the scholarship program she had created. Father Michael, his hair now completely white, was preparing for the inaugural blessing. His words of wisdom had been fundamental in the most difficult moments of that journey. "Look at that," he commented, observing the movement. "How God writes straight with crooked lines." The institute was an impressive construction, but perfectly integrated into the natural landscape. Its equipped laboratories would study the preservation of the region's water resources, while its classrooms would train the next generations of environmental defenders. "This place is proof that dreams know no limits," John declared in his inauguration speech. "It was born from the union of people who believed that good can always win, that truth always finds its way." Rose, who had developed a revolutionary method of working with horses based on sensitivity and mutual trust, would coordinate the Equine Therapy Center. Her story of overcoming and redemption inspired all who knew her. "Sometimes we need to lose something to see what really matters," she shared with the audience. "My blindness taught me to see with the heart." Among those present was Charles Mendoza, Samuel's former lawyer who had chosen the side of justice. He now taught legal ethics at the law school and used his experience to teach about the importance of professional integrity. In the afternoon, a special presentation moved everyone. Children from the equine therapy program, mounted on horses, trained according to Rose's method, gave a demonstration that brought tears and smiles from the audience. Maverick, as always, stole the show. The old horse gently led a small 6-year-old rider, his bright eyes demonstrating the same nobility that had made him face the furious waters of the river on that memorable night. At sunset, as the last guests were saying goodbye, John gathered his closest group for a moment of reflection. Sarah Thompson, Rose, Sheriff Norris, Mrs. Carman, and Father Michael each had contributed in a unique way to this story of overcoming. "The Guiding Star Ranch," said John, his voice choked with emotion, "has always been more than a piece of land. It's a symbol of hope, a beacon that shows that the most difficult paths often lead us to the most beautiful destinations." Rose, holding Sarah Thompson's hand, added, "And it teaches us that family is not just a matter of blood, but of love and loyalty." The sky was beginning to be dotted with stars when Maverick softly neighed, as if wanting to participate in that moment. His sound echoed across the ranch fields, carrying with it the memory of all the battles won, all the dreams realized. The Guiding Star Ranch, which had once almost succumbed to greed and evil, now shone brighter than ever, not just as a rural property, but as a beacon of hope and transformation. Its stories of love, courage, and redemption would continue to inspire future generations, proving that when the heart is pure and intentions are noble, there is no storm that cannot be overcome.